You to support a president that makes sure we had the lowest black unemployment, to make sure black babies ain't being killed, to make sure there's money invested in our community. Well, tell them you're the best racist ever. I mean, and somebody, please do me a favor. Can somebody tell Donald Trump how to be a racist? Because he's not doing a good job.
Yo, Black Lives Matter! Actually, all lives matter. That's racist. Black Lives Matter!
One day later.
That's racist. All lives matter!
There's $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when...
Ooh, that was an... Okay.
You study today's black culture is trash. Ain't nothing positive about black culture. We're not highlighting spelling bee winners. We don't talk about the newest black business that's doing good. When you go on social media, you look at some of the most trending videos and trending topics. It ain't black empowerment. It ain't uplifting black people. When you look at our movies, we ain't got no black heroes. Black culture has black propaganda. Hitler used propaganda to get the Germans to turn on the Jews. We use propaganda for our culture. We propagate pimps, gangsters, killers, womanizers, robbers, deceit, being unfaithful. We got some propaganda, homie, that's brainwashing.
I am a pastor. I'm a man of faith. I have a profound reverence for life. Well, I want to save your life.
I have to respond to this very quick because he told me Black Lives Matter. And if you think about it, Senator, in Atlanta, Georgia, there's more black baby that is aborted than anything. So if Black Lives Matter, why are you not protecting those babies? And instead of aborting those babies, why are you not baptizing those babies?
The Woman King is a modern-day version of D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. The 1915 silent film was used to promote racism through its false narratives. The Woman King does the same thing. It lies and misappropriates history, leaving the viewer into thinking that the Dahomey tribe eradicated slavery from within their ranks. They did not. Instead, they continued on with impunity. Yet, people still make excuses. Some people refuse to put any blame whatsoever on Africa for their huge part in the slave trade. Now, why is that? Black Lives Matter! Oh, did you see the new Candace Owens film on BLM? Nah, man, you a sellout. Oh, you mean BLM raising nearly $80 million, but almost zero money going to the black community? Building several lavish multi-million-dollar properties in affluent all-white neighborhoods and investing $32 million in Wall Street? You mean that kind of a sellout? Oh, man, Black Lives Matter! Despite Roots' claim that during the heyday of the massive slave trade from West Africa to America, a white man was more likely to develop malaria in Africa than catch slaves. The average life expectancy of a white male in sub-Saharan Africa's interior at the time was less than a year. Men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere arrived on Africa's coast, bought slaves, and fled as quickly as they could. For the slave trade to be possible, they needed massive help from Africans. Because we do not want to be numbers, we will defend the value of the human being. Every single human being, because each of us has a unique genetic code that is unrepeatable. And like it or not, that is sacred. We will defend it. We will defend God, country, and family. For those things that disgust people so much, we will do it to defend our freedom. Because we will never be slaves and simple consumers at the mercy of financial speculators.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
This is what Reagan later meant by "we are a shining city on a hill."
All right, everybody. How you guys doing?
This is the Kyle Suggs Show, and we are here talking about the Joe Rogan podcast that I just spent the past, I don't know, about 4 hours getting up, getting in, watching, taking notes. And I want to talk to you about the Joe Rogan podcast, because if you look at the thumbnail here, you'll see that essentially the election at this point, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely over. Now, of course, I have to say, just for the record, that anything is possible, especially considering what happened in 2020. But the situations that were in that particular election, I think, are mitigated in many different ways. But in this particular podcast, Joe Rogan does an excellent job of bringing up election integrity, and I want to talk to you about that. In fact, what I have in front of me here is a 30-minute, I took notes every 30 minutes of the particular podcast with Joe Rogan, which dropped pretty much last night at about 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so what I'm going to do is, I don't want to spoil it for you. I want you guys to go out and look at it, because it's 3 hours. But to me, it's so good to see just a process where two people are talking to each other as if they're in a coffee shop, or in this case, in a studio in Texas, and just about issues and policies that we haven't heard much at all. Because you either have, if you go to the Trump rally and you go hear a Trump speech, yeah, you get this, but those speeches are suppressed. They're not shown on network media. And then any kind of filtering you hear about Trump is coming through a leftist narrative, which wants you to think that he is this Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, whatever you want to pick of the week, that the left wants to do to deflect from the fact that they don't have any policies. And so let me just first of all say, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. My name is Kyle Suggs, and this is the Conservative Take. And this particular live stream, we're going to cover the Joe Rogan podcast that just dropped. It's amazing. I think it's got 17 million views already within like the first within the first 6 hours. And we're going to talk about that in detail, but I don't want to spoil too much. So I'm going to kind of go through my notes here and kind of give my impression of what I was looking at and watching, because there were some things that they were talking about had nothing to do with politics. It was just them kicking it and whatever. And it was just really, like I said before, very, very encouraging and interesting to see. And also, just like the McDonald's bit that he did when he was a fry chef or fry order cook, and was he was doing fast food delivery through the drive-in of a McDonald's, and it just went super duper crazy on social media. Just like that particular 15-minute bit, right? As we all know, it was, of course it was prearranged and staged, of course, because the Secret Service had to have provisions in place. And of course, the left, no matter what Trump does, they have to have something against it. But the point is, and what the overlying narrative is, and the truth is that Trump is a human being. He's likable. He's funny. And that's what we also see here in this podcast. But we get 3 hours of it instead of just that 15 minutes. And so this is why the left is incensed. So we're going to do that. We're going to go through this for the first hour. It looks like my Rumble feed is not working, which is fine. When we do the break at the end of this, typically I go to Rumble and I go to X to talk about things that you can't really talk about on YouTube. So, and on Facebook for that matter. So what I'll do, since Rumble doesn't actually it's working right now. It's actually working right now. I just saw that. So for those on Rumble right now, welcome. I just saw my notification. Rumble is streamed now. Great. Awesome. So enough of that. So, but after we do the first hour on YouTube, we'll do another hour on Rumble or so. And at the end of that, we're going to do a 30-minute session on our locals section, which I'll leave a link in the description. Actually, in fact, there's already one there now for members on the Conservative Take. And that's going to be free for now, but eventually we'll have a paywall behind that. But there's tons of articles on our locals. So I recommend you check that out. There's a bunch of stuff out there that we do. Put articles out maybe once or twice or once every other day or so, depending on what's going on in the news and on social media. And then after that, after that break, I think we may do this whole thing on YouTube, and then we will go into the projections of the election, all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. The live stream we did last week, I have to apologize. My microphone was turned on my actual Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, my actual camera. It wasn't on the actual Shure. It was on my Brio 4K. And so the audio sounds horrible. So if you saw the video last week, the live stream, I apologize. I didn't check that portion of it, but we appear to be coming through the right way. So I'm going to do the same thing, which is even better because it's going to be updated information as it relates to the early voting that's happening. And Trump is absolutely killing it. And so getting back to my original point about this election being over, is because of what Joe Rogan did for Trump. I mean, he gave him a platform for 3 hours, and Trump, he went in some places, he held back in some places. I think he actually talked about election integrity, he mentioned J6, but he did talk about the election and his thoughts there and why he feels that he won the election, which I feel the same way. And also he talked about things that had nothing to do with anything other than sports or UFOs or JFK or MLK, those sorts of things as well. So there's something for everybody. And what I really appreciate most about this is that Joe Rogan had his back. Okay, he had his back. He had Trump's back because Rogan knows how the media spins stuff. He mentions stuff about how they manipulate stuff. They take stuff out of context, like the debunked Fine Young People, all of these sorts of things. Well, Trump mentioned about going to the White House. And let's just start there. I'll start there, and we'll start there. So within the first, and by the way, if you guys want to have comments, please do so. I'll take a break periodically. Again, it's just me in the studio today. There's no moderator here, or there's no person to produce anything. So I got a lot of stuff I'm looking at here, a lot of stuff I'm throwing at me. So I may make some mistakes here and there, but so far we seem to be pretty good. My monitor looks good. And so I think we're in good shape. If the audio doesn't sound right or whatever, please yell at me, put it in a comment. I have no problem with that, and I will fix it. I'll take a quick break and I'll fix it, and we'll come back. All right, so let's, again, let me go back to my thing here. Sorry. Let me see if any comments up here first. There are no comments. All right, so let's get into this. And so what I want to talk about, first of all, is the first 30 minutes. And so they were talking about the weaponization, investigations, and how politics are being weaponized. They were talking about legal investigations with comparisons with Al Capone, claims of political targeting, and then getting into the election 220 claims. Trump takes the opinion that it was stolen. And if you look at the election, I've done several videos. If you go back to November of 2020, and if you go back and look into the beginning of 2021, when we're leading up to January 6th, and I had several videos out there, I think 3 or 4, talking about what would happen for the certification and all that stuff. And I'm on record for saying this because, there's some things in the election process that happened that had nothing to do with some of the more radical conspiratorial types of things that were suggested, by the various people looking at this. But if you just look at it from a sense of laws, statutes, and things that have to be held up in terms of election laws, particularly in Wisconsin, in, let's say, Georgia, and let's say Arizona, and particularly in Pennsylvania for that matter, where Trump, if you look at 3 states, he lost by 40,000 votes. If you add up 20,000 in Wisconsin, 10,000 in Georgia, and 10,000 in Arizona, those were super duper tight. And so those could have been flipped, not necessarily from, let's say, someone switching a vote or anything like that, but it had to do with just the validity of the ballots themselves. Was there a clear chain of custody? Was the law being upheld? And in those 3 cases, I made cases on this channel many times where they were not. So we'll leave it there. And that's what Trump was trying to say. And then when Rogan brings up the point, he says, hey, so, and I like Rogan because he's not carrying the water for Trump at all. He doesn't carry the water for anybody. He comes at it from a curiosity standpoint where he's like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Please clarify. And that's all we ask for in this sphere. We don't want people carrying our water for us, like what happened with 60 Minutes, which they brought up with Kamala Harris, where they literally edited a question and took the answer and not just edited the, maybe took out some pauses in the question or maybe cut the question or the answer. They took the whole answer out and replaced it with another answer from another question. Totally. I mean, and Trump brings up a really interesting thing here in this particular. I didn't think about this, right? He's talking about essentially like the FCC and these things are given out for free because we're using public airways, and thereby CBS being on one of the big three networks, that they have to tie a tighter line. This isn't cable news, and would they have more leeway? But I think even in terms of journalistic integrity, which by the way was something that people took seriously. I mean, if you look at the Atwater tape that came out, which was back in, I believe it was in the I think the actual, Lee Atwater was he was a consultant for Reagan, and then he was quoted as saying the N-word like 7 times in a row, and it was supposed to be off record in terms of that particular thing. But I did a whole thing on that showing you why this Republican strategist for Reagan, why he did use the word, he was using as a quote to identify people's thoughts about a particular issue. Not that he believed that, but that what the racist Democrats in the South thought. And on top of all that, he said, this is off the record. It never should have gotten out. And it didn't get out until something happened later. But the point is, they had a gold mine back in the 70s and 80s that they could have brought out at any time, and then just to discredit Republicans. But because it was off record, the reporter didn't do it. Do you think for a second, if that happened to any Republican for that matter, but definitely Trump, if he's actually even writing the words to a rap song, if he's reading the words to a rap song where they're using the N-word, totally legitimate, right? They would use that and cut it and say, look, this is what Trump said. Journalistic integrity is absolutely dead. And what Joe Rogan was doing here throughout the entire interview, he was clarifying his points and saying, no, that's not what you meant. You said this, because if you're talking 3 hours, you're going to misspeak. I'm going to misspeak in this particular live stream. I've done it all the time. I go back and look at stuff and say, wow, I said that? That was a mistake, because, we're humans. We make mistakes. So when Trump was saying things that he knew would trip him up in the media after the fact, Rogan came in and said, no, what you meant was this, because that's what you said before. Not that he's carrying his water, but he's just correcting him. Just like he even mentioned the fact when Trump talked about the Lincoln bedroom. And by the way, this is what I thought was cool, because Rogan, being the curious person that he is, he just wants to know, I've never heard anyone say, what was it like when you first get, the gig, right? What was it like when you first become president, when you first walk in the White House, when you first do this and this? And I thought that was a really interesting question to lead off. And Trump talks about it. I'll let you see it for yourself. But to give you context of this next thing, I'm going to say, he talks about going to the Lincoln bedroom, which Lincoln is one of my favorite presidents of all time. I think I mentioned this last week. I have a paperweight of Lincoln here. If you can see that or not. And I just love Lincoln. He's fantastic. And he's a complex person. I would love to do a live stream just on Lincoln. But he was like how tall he was, 6'3", 6'4", somewhere in there. And so he talks about the bed. He talks about little Tad. There's a picture of him. It was his son who died in the White House, which, by the way, I'll drift off here a little bit, which is a really sad story. So Tad was one of his sons, may have been his youngest son. He was stricken with a horrible illness. I'm not sure what it was, but he was upstairs in the White House, literally on his death throes. And Mary Todd was up there. She was sulking and crying the whole time. But down below, there's some sort of state dinner going on. There are people in the house. They're entertaining guests in the White House. It's a party going on. And the whole time, Tad is actually dying. And I believe he dies at night as the party was going on. And Lincoln was a very, very depressed individual. He talks about the melancholy and all that stuff, which I knew about. But here's the thing I'm talking about. He goes in and talks about how Lincoln was, I think he used the word paranoid of Robert E. Lee, who was the Confederate general. He was all over the entire Confederate army, I believe. I mean, armies of all the armies. There are several armies, but of the Army of Northern Virginia. So that was the primary wing on the eastern front of the Civil War, east of the Mississippi River. Their main adversary was the Army of Northern. I'm sorry, their army was the Army of the Potomac, which was the Union. The fact is, they won a lot of battles, and it just frustrated Lincoln like crazy. And so, after telling that story briefly, right, later on, about 10 minutes later, Rogan says, "Yeah, well, you know they're gonna get on you about mentioning Robert E. Lee," and he knew that, so he got ahead of it. So he looked out for him. But I knew for a fact if he had just let that go and didn't say anything about it, the media would say, "Yeah, Trump praises Robert E. Lee." Okay, I'm going to praise him right here. Robert E. Lee was a fantastic general. Was he perfect? No, he made some mistakes here and there, but don't tell some people that. I mean, he wasn't perfect. But he was a fantastic general. He took the audacity, he took the initiative on many battles like Chancellorsville and many others, where he was able to overrun an army that was bigger than he was and frustrate the Union. He was fantastic. He was a fantastic strategist. And he was bold and aggressive. And he had good leaders like Hill and like Jackson. And forget the other guy's name. Anyway, he had great generals. And so Jeb Stuart was a good one. And so that's what I'm talking about. I guarantee you the media would have gotten all over him about that. So let's see some questions here. Yeah, so Stephen Ritchie here says, that was a great interview last night. It was. I got up about 2:00 in the morning. I saw something on my feed that I guess was on X. I saw it come up. I was like, wow, I got to check this out. So I put it on about 2:30. I got finished right around 4 or 5 o'clock. And I said, you know what? I got to do a live stream on this because this is the hottest thing going on right now. And I think for the reasons I mentioned before, it's just the sharing of information. Gone to the days of like Phil Donahue, where he would have a person sitting across from him. Phil Donahue, for those of you who don't know, was Oprah before Oprah. And they'd have these hour-long talk shows, and he would sit down, and most of the time he would just have a confused look on his face, especially if it was a person that he didn't quite agree with. Look at the particular episode of Milton Friedman. He was economist. I believe he won the Nobel Prize for economy, I believe. One of the most brilliant minds of economics in the past 80 years. I don't think anybody would argue on that. But the point is, people sitting across from him, they could talk without being interrupted, without being shouted down, without being, fact checked. I mean, you bring someone on your show because they're an expert. So if they're an expert, why are you fact checking them? I mean, and then you can, whatever. But okay, so this person here, Carol says, I had videos of the cheating, but Google, you know what, dude? Yeah, I'm sorry, dude, Carol. I had a video deleted. I'll go and tell you the story now, since we're talking about Gettysburg and, well, not Gettysburg, but the Civil War somewhat. So January 6th, where I was in Gettysburg. I do battlefield tours there, and I'm doing some canvassing there and kind of scouting around. And my phone is blowing up. I was like, what's going on? I mean, I know, I'm already not in a good state anyway, because I know what's going on in DC. And I'm like, we lost and this and that, and we got to deal with Biden and all that stuff. But so I'm getting something on here, and I said, oh boy. And so I'm seeing people say, where are you at? Are you in DC? And so then as I'm getting these messages come across, I'm literally standing there right on Chamberlain Pike, where the Buford statue is. If you've been to Gettysburg, you know what I'm talking about. Colonel Buford on the first day of the battle, actually the day before the battle and the first day of the battle, where he was the one with the binoculars looking down Seminary Ridge, McPherson Ridge, and all that stuff, trying to see who's coming up the front so he could find out where the attack's coming from, right? So in doing so, he basically did, a defense in force, where he was basically mounted his cavalry and all that stuff. So it's a very cool part of the battlefield to be in. And I basically did a video and said, hey, something's going on in DC, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know what's going on. And so about 2 hours later, that video was totally removed from YouTube. It was never told to me why it was deleted or anything. But seriously, I'm not in DC. I'm reporting on text coming into my phone. I know nothing about anything, but yet it still gets deleted. So anyway, that was the kind of world that I realized that we're going to be dealing with for the next 4 years. And I think one thing Rogan does is he basically, he talks for us. Okay. I mean, he says, no, this makes zero sense. You know, it makes zero sense. I mean, and he says the quiet parts out loud that if this was in a live setting of a pundit on CNN who may be a Republican, that person would get shut down. That happened just a minute ago. I mean, the guy from Shark Tank, I don't know, Leary, is that the guy's name? The boy-headed guy, Leary from Shark Tank. He's a correspondent or a contributor, I guess it was CNN or MSNBC, wherever he was. But he basically said, yeah, Kamala Harris was, she was not democratically appointed. And then the whole room just blows up. And before he's even able to get his point in and defend himself, he gets, bum rushed by these woke triggered political activists for the Democrat Party disguised as CNN analysts. And it was just, it's frustrating. We all are tired of that particular approach to journalism, quote unquote journalism, when basically all they're trying to do is just carry the water so that the left can maintain their power at the expense of us. That's all this is about. People wonder, well, why is it that, we say the sky is blue and we're gaslit in saying and hearing that the sky is orange. And if we say the sky is blue, then we get canceled. And then we get put, oh my gosh, you must be a blue skyist. You must be, you must be anti, you must be anti-orange or what do you call it? And so they call you these names, they stigmatize you. And you're wondering, this is a form of mental abuse. This is a form of mental abuse. That's what gaslighting is. And we're tired of that. And so I think what we appreciate about people like Rogan is that he has his own platform. He's able to have this discussion, allow it to breathe, allow the person on the other side of him explain and defend the things he has. And Rogan challenged him on a couple things. And I thought that was pretty good. And Trump even said at one point, yeah, well, I didn't know about that. I think he's referring to something about dealing with polio, where Trump talked about polio being discovered en masse in the Gaza Strip. And then Rogan says, well, is it this kind of polio? And Trump said, oh, I don't know. I never heard that. You know what I mean? So that's how this thing went. So he did push back on him, which is awesome, which I don't know. So of course they got into around the first hour after that. They talked about borders and immigration issues. They focused the shift on immigration to human trafficking, which is incredible. And how Trump mentioned that, there's more, and I've heard this before, there's just almost more money in human trafficking than there is with drug trafficking. Utterly disgusting. Yeah, let's bring this particular comment up here. This is correct. So Debbie 101 says, I'm not sure what JMO means, so help me out there. Oh, just my opinion. Okay, just my opinion. If she can't handle the pressures of campaigning, how is she going to handle the pressures of being president? I've said it before. She just wants the title, not the job, just like Biden. Spot on, 100%. In fact, I would even mention in this podcast, well, not the part of wanting the position, but the fact that if she can't handle the pressure, I mean, can you imagine her going up against some of these leaders around the world who hate us? Can you imagine her in front of Putin? Can you imagine her in front of Xi of China? These people are like experts at what they do, and they know exactly what they want, and they know how to smell weakness. If you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, I guess the guy's name, who was the Russian president? Oh gosh, it's going to escape me now. Anyway, the Russian president, the United Socialist Soviet Republic, USSR. What's the guy's name? Oh my gosh, this is going to make me upset. Anyway, he basically said that he was going to test the young leader. In this case, it was JFK. Here you see this guy is coming. He's 42 years old, or roughly youngest president ever elected. And he saw this person as a weakness. And Khrushchev, I believe his name is. And he said, I will bury you. He wanted to test this young president to see if he had any resolve. So if you have weapons in Poland, guess what? I'm going to throw some weapons here in Cuba and see what you're going to do about it. And so when the world leaders who have an agenda sense that you're weak and you're not going to do anything, guess what? It reminds me of the Chris Rock episode where Chris Rock talks about, man, if a woman knows you want to hit her, ooh, she'll do anything to you, right? You remember that skit that Chris Rock did back in the 90s? Said that if a woman knows that a man won't hit her, and he said, look, don't get me wrong, there's never, ever, 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 ever a reason to ever hit a woman. He goes into that whole bit, right? But it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. And so, and I see Kamala Harris as president going to a foreign state, especially being on visiting territory. Can you imagine her going into North Korea and sitting down with Kim Jong-un? I just can't see it. And I think the American public doesn't want to see that either. In fact, right around the time of the bombing, I believe, I saw the reports where Israel had retaliatory strikes into Iran. And someone asked me I have a little conservative think tank that I talk about on a private messaging app. And we all get together and talk about things and joke around, whatever. But when that happened, they asked me, how is this going to affect the election? And of course, I don't know. But my thought is, unless we get attacked in such a way that's going to demand a military response immediately, then I don't think anything's going to happen. In fact, I think it's going to hurt Kamala, because as the world is openly dangerous, like it is now, especially when we see bombs landing in foreign territories of countries that absolutely declare us as enemies, the Americans and people in general, they want someone who is strong. And now they have a decision to make in about 9 days, roughly, of who to make. I don't see them when you have active war going on overseas that could affect us ultimately, especially if more countries get involved. We want someone who's going to do something about it or prevent it from happening at all, which is what I think the overall consensus is of people in this country feel and know, for that matter, is quantifiable. There is no feeling at this point, unless you're just a Trump derangement syndrome graduate, that we were safer under Trump, period. There were no new wars. And at the point where Trump told that particular, I'm not sure if Afghanistan, it was the Taliban leader or whomever it was, that, you do this to any of our soldiers and I'm going to do this to you. And then for like 18 months straight, there was no retaliatory attacks or no deaths or loss of life for our soldiers over there. And he even said that Biden even admitted that. So that's the kind of thing that people are looking for. The human trafficking is absolutely crazy. Talked about inconsistent policy positions. Talked about they criticize politicians, particularly Democrats, for flip-flopping on policies related to immigration, guns, and taxes, suggesting a disconnect between political elites and the average citizen. And that is 100% spot on. And I think Joe Rogan really nailed the pulse of the nation in terms of woke agenda. Now, he didn't use terms that I use. He used terms like, they're screwing with us, right? It's us. They're screwing with us. I would use oligarchs. I would use the political permanent class. I would use that sort of thing. And to identify the vertical realignment that we're seeing, not just around America, but also all around the world. You look at France, you look at Italy, across Europe, you're seeing a realignment where it's not ideology in terms of a left position or a right position, or a conservative position or a liberal position, or Democrat or Republican position. No, what we're seeing now is a us versus them. It's we the people versus the rich, elite, permanent political class oligarchs. And those are the ones that are keeping us down, keeping us fighting amongst ourselves, because at the end of the day, like I said before, it's all about them maintaining, controlling their own power, their own wealth, their own prestige around the world at our expense. Do what we say and take it. And if you don't agree with us, well, we have options. We can cancel you, we can ridicule you, we can stigmatize you, or worse. Right? You know what I'm talking about. And so that was absolutely right. And that's why Trump ultimately is going to win the election, barring any other nonsense that I alluded to before. And if you look at, I'm deviating here a little bit. And one more thing, I'm going to say one thing quickly because I may forget. I never heard this before, but I'm glad Rogan brought this up, because one of the biggest criticisms of Trump, and me early on as well, and in fact, maybe my criticism of him up until just a few hours ago, because I didn't fully understand it. And that was the way that he weaves in and out stories. And from the very beginning, from 2016, actually 2015, when he had that first debate, which he mentioned in the actual podcast, the Rosie O'Donnell debate, where he basically talks about, during that time period, he didn't use a teleprompter early on. He didn't. He just talked willy-nilly for like an hour and a half, never used a teleprompter, because he would actually say, if you use a teleprompter, you're not on your game, you're not sharp. But he had to use one later on to rein him in, because he called it weaving in and out. And it was started by Rogan, because Rogan, he saw that he was talking about a point, ask a question. I asked question A. So Trump answers question A, but he deviates into A1, A2, A3, B7, And so I know Trump, he's going to eventually get back, but Rogan only has 3 hours. So then he says, okay, can we get back to A? And Trump says, oh yeah, because they're talking about the weaving. And Trump says, I know that I'm weaving, which means he's weaving in and out stories. And he's saying that it's challenging to do that and sometimes dangerous to do that. But he says also more engaging when you do that. So he's aware of that. And he does it purposefully to keep he keeps the discussion more lively. I'd never, ever heard him say that. I'm sure I'd never heard him say that. And it's a perfectly logical reason to do what he does, because there's so much to say. And of course, if he's going to continually be fact-checked, if he's going to continually be asked about his motives, he's going to have to do a tangent. He's going to have to explain things as he goes, because they're going to say, well, you talked about General Lee. So he's got to talk about, why Lee was a great leader, but why I don't necessarily agree with him for different reasons. But you see what I'm saying? So that weaving goes in there to make the story more interesting. So Rogan called him on that, and then they agreed that's what's going to happen, and we just came to expect it. And so not everything got 100% answered all the time, but most of it. Joe was able to bring him back into the discussion to a point where we could get our answers for what he said. And he pushed him on the election several times, which I thought was 2020, that is. And that was pretty good. So, see no more questions here. No questions here. So around halfway through, they talked about national security and classified information. The conversation touched on the RFK files, more or less. And he mentioned briefly about the Martin Luther King Jr. files. So Rogan asked him essentially, hey, so what's up with the RFK files? Are you going to, hi, Dina, how you doing? I'm doing well. So he asked Rogan asked Trump, so he said, what's up with the JFK files? And he actually asked him directly, like, what happened? What did you discover? And Trump was like, oh, so, well, he said, I got into it. I opened them up. I read through some of it, but then some leaders and some friends that I highly respect within the government, and I guess outside, whomever who was privy to that information, told him not to release all of it. And part of the reasons were because of people still alive and other things too. And he mentioned that there's also an MLK file for Martin Luther King Jr. as well that he would be willing to release. But he said that he would release the JFK file pretty much as soon as he got into office, which I thought was really interesting there. And they talked about UFO and military encounters there. Rogan is really big into that. Trump said, there's basically no reason not to believe it. Personally, I don't think they're UFOs personally, but that's another topic altogether. But the fact that he brought it up and he answered the question, I thought was pretty good. Actually, we're getting into the rest of the. Did I miss anything here? I think I'm covered the whole. Okay, so yeah, so the last segment was dealing with global affairs and avoiding war. I kind of touched on that. Trump talked about strategies for handling Ukraine, Russia, and China. He promised to de-escalate conflicts through diplomacy and tariffs, which I thought was really, really good. Now, let's talk about tariffs a little bit, because one thing people don't, and I criticized him in some ways too early on, is that he's not, and it's not a detrimental criticism. It's just something I would like for him to do better. But he's winning, so he shouldn't change anything, right? What he's doing, keep doing what you're doing, and that's why he is who he is. That's why he's winning what he's winning, because he is him. If he did it my way, he probably would have lost. So do what you do, but it is good to hear policies come out of your candidate. And I don't think Pence did a good job of that, but I think J.D. Vance is excellent at that. And so, but on tariffs, I think Trump does a really good job of laying out what the thing is. And if you want to know some policy on the economy, this wasn't the one. This was not the one. Go check out the 20 or 25-minute podcast he did with Dave Ramsey a couple weeks ago. Check that out. I'd never seen Trump talk about more policy in my life of a technical nature. He's got a command of this stuff. But I think he doesn't want to let stuff out too much, because he's going to let his enemies and his, people who are running against him take it. Hello, tax on tips. So just think if he went through his whole strategy, just think if Trump went through his entire strategy, what he wants to do to fix the country. Guess what? Kamala Harris, within the next 30 minutes, will have the exact same policy. She changed 15 of her long-held policies, and now she's about as MAGA as it comes. She's, along the way, changing her access from black to, or I won't say black, I'll say urban to less urban, we'll put it that way, just to fit in to a crowd and do the same fist pump. Turn back the page. You mean the same page that you were in the past 4 years? Oh, no, Trump is Hitler. And everybody goes, yeah, because they're NPCs, non-playable characters who will listen to anything, as long as they're blue. Was it anyone? What's the saying? Anyone with blue. I don't know. There's a slogan basically says, as long as you're a Democrat, we're voting for you. In fact, let me just say this real quickly. I went to vote first day of election day here where my state is. I went in there 8 o'clock in the morning. I was right there, give or take 8:15. The polls opened at 8. It was 8:30. It doesn't matter. 8:45. I was about the third person in line, but that's not the point. So I'm going in, whatever, and my son's in the car. I'm gonna vote really quickly, and then I'm going to get on the road and do what I have to do. And so, of course, you go there. You have polling people that are there, and there was a white woman there and a black woman there. I think in their mid 40s, maybe 50s. And so, hey, sir, would you like to? Because I wasn't wearing anything Republican at all. I was just wearing, basically what I'm wearing now, minus the hat. And I went in there, and she said, "Yeah, so you wanna some information about the Democrat Party?" Of course I do, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let me hear it. So I live for this kind of stuff. So I take it, whatever, and I'm looking over it, whatever, knowing the answer is coming. Because I used to do this. I used to be one of these people. I used to be on the other side of this. So I know exactly what they're thinking. I know everything that these people think and everything. So because I was on their side. So I'm like, whatever. Like, yeah, this is interesting. This is cool. So then she said, so can you, can I, I said, ma'am, can I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, because I'm thinking about voting for Trump. Right. And so then it just goes downhill from there. So I asked a question pretty much about black people, because a black person was there. I was like, so my ancestors, I'm talking like they talk. brother man, and your ancestors are coming back from Afro ships, and the European, the Afrocentric people in the Americas were suppressed by the white man, all that crap, whatever. So anyway, I'm talking like that. So I said, so you mean to tell me that my ancestors came over on slave ships, came to this country, got free, sweat, bled, and died for the rights that they were given and fought for and bled for and died for, that they handed down to their ancestors, to their descendants, handed down to their descendants, and so on, upwards towards me, which I'm a benefit from those struggles. And I said, so that was like 200 years. So why is it fair that someone can hop a fence and get more benefits than those people that came across on those slave ships that bled, sweat, and died to come here? And then the black woman just went crazy. What are we talking about? That's not true. Talking about carrying the water for somebody. I'm like, lady, are you serious? So then I'm not gonna go through the whole conversation, but the point is, at the very end of it, by the way, I'm like, I said, so ma'am, if I'm black, do I have to vote Democrat? Ma'am, if I'm black, do I have to vote Democrat? One more time. Ma'am, if I'm black, do I have to? Yes, yes. That's all I had to do. At that point in time, I was like, you know what? We're done. So I was laughing, jumping up and down, saying, yes, I finally got someone to finally say it. Finally tell me. I know Joe Biden basically said it. He had the courage to say it. Why can't you say it? And I'm like, the amount of the obtuseness in your argument and your logic. So no matter what they're doing, if I'm black, no matter what, you're basically opening it up to anything they do, no matter what, I have to vote for them regardless. That is utterly insulting coming from a black woman. Utterly insulting. Coming from anybody for that matter. And so, I don't know how I got here to talk about that, but that's essentially, actually I had no point there, whatever, but that's a good story. So, but that's kind of what's going on here. And I think people are tired of having that narrative shoved down our throats that if we look like somebody else, we have to adhere to them on an ideological basis. They don't pay my bills. They don't support my family. If I vote today for the Democrat Party, they don't care about me tomorrow. In fact, I'll say another story. I was a campaign manager for a guy in North Carolina. He was running for State House 59 back around 2012. And we're in the parade at North Carolina A&T University, A&T, Aggie Pride. And so, we're going down the parade route. By the way, this is A&T Homecoming. So if you have any idea, in Greensboro, North Carolina, A&T Homecoming is off the hook. All right, especially back then. And so we're there early in the morning. It's kind of cold, whatever. And so we're going down the street. And Jim is white. All right, so he's got me in the car. And I even believe that Mark Robinson was there too. I believe he may have been there. Mark Robinson, who's running for governor of North Carolina, he may have been there as well. But there are only like 4 or 5 black people in Guilford County Republican Party who were active. So we were all in the car. So we're going down the road, and it's like, so that I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. And it's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching because she said, it's heart-wrenching, seriously. She said, this lady, a black lady, said, hey, Jim, hey, how you doing? Are you going to come back after this year? Are we going to see you again after this? There's a speech by George W. Bush early in his presidency. I believe it was I guess if I had to guess, I'd say 2000, maybe during the second term, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Where he had Jesse Jackson in the room. He was talking before. You can look this up on C-SPAN. You can find the speech. And you can easily find this. He was talking with the Urban League, I believe, because first of all, the NAACP told him you can't speak for us. Or they were just totally blasting George W. Bush. Now, by the way, I'm not a Bush fan. I was then. I'm not anymore. He's a globalist and all that. But he's still a Republican, and a Republican is like, Satan to these people. So the NAACP was trashing him and all this. And so he eventually went to the Urban League, which is another African or a black organization, which to me has more credibility, more of a business style of urbanization and civic opportunities for blacks and whatnot. Anyway, he's speaking at this particular event. You have Jesse Jackson there, you have Al Sharpton there, and all this stuff going on. And it's one of George W. Bush's best speeches that's not related to the war. He said he welcomed Jesse, he welcomed Al, and then he said, kind of like make the icebreaker in the room to kind of, he had George Bush, man. Republicans, by the way, before I get to the story, Republicans were absolutely hated back then. Hated. And see, I'm old enough to remember, I was the YR chair for my local county. I grew my county to the top 3 counties in the state through just efforts that we did. But in doing that, it was very difficult because being a Republican back then was the worst. We would be at university and be surrounded by people beating drums who just smelled bad. We call them dirty hippies. They were just beating drums, shouting you down or whatever. And I would be debating people in a crowd, talking about my positions about things. And so that was the climate back then. Fortunately, it didn't get violent, even though Jim did get attacked and he had to call the police on them in this one instance, but it wasn't as bad as it is today. Okay, so getting back to the speech, George W. Bush says this. He says, there's a saying that says that the Republican Party, or the elephant, he said, the elephant is too big for blacks to swallow, but they're choking on the donkey. And in that speech, he said that to say, hey, Republicans may not be there for you. Maybe it's too big a jump for you to come on our side to identify with what we're doing. But the Democrat Party is not only doing nothing for you, but it's choking you. That's fantastic. That was a fantastic thing for him to say. And so, and that's essentially where we are in terms of politics and what Trump's able to do. He's able to skim off that. Well, first of all, people are getting younger now. They're younger than they were then. And the older people who are tied in with the civil rights movement are either they're dying off and they're not as influential anymore. And so the younger people coming up, people under 50, particularly black men in particular, working class blacks in big urban areas like Portland, like Baltimore, like Chicago, like Philadelphia, like Atlanta, like everywhere. It's across the board. Where it's been polled, working class black men under 50 in high concentrated municipal areas, population centers, are swinging to Trump by 20 points more than Biden in 2020. And so what's happening is, of course, all these states, you wonder why Trump's doing better in California. Why is he doing better in Chicago? Why is he doing better in Hawaii? Why is he doing better in Philadelphia, in Bucks County? Why is he doing better in Atlanta? Why is the black turnout so low all over the country? Well, I suspect that they're probably low because they're voting for Trump, or they're disenfranchised and not voting at all. That's what Trump's doing. In 2016, where we had 200 counties across the country, particularly in the Rust Belt, the Iowas, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, the Philadelphias, the Pennsylvanias, even the Ohios, 200 counties voted for Democrats every single cycle, not just presidential, also midterms, going back to the caucus in the 80s. White, sometimes rural, but working class for sure. Union, white men and women, for that matter, but mostly men, voted for the Republican candidate for the first time in over 30 years. That happened in 2016. And that's why Trump was able to break the blue wall with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And because he skimmed those numbers off. And now, here's the cool part, which is why he's going to win, barring anything that I mentioned before, is because those voters haven't gone anywhere. They're still there. So his ceiling is still there. But what's different is, like I said before, is the skimming off of these Black, Hispanic, under 50 working class people in these high concentrated populated areas by 20% across the board. Which is why Trump will probably win the popular vote. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. If you look at white under 50 working class men who don't go to church or are non-religious, they're breaking at 20% the same way, regardless of where they are geographically speaking. So, dude, I'm telling you right now, that alone is enough to turn the election big time, not just win, but I mean landslide. Then you saw something here just a minute ago, with Trump's leading in Arab Americans by 2% in a poll there. If you want to know anything I'm saying here, go to our Twitter feed, go to x.com/TCT. Let me put it up here on the screen so you guys can see it. These are all links here. So go there, and everything I'm quoting here, you can see a link in our stream. If you don't see it, go to the search button in our X feed and click the magnifying glass and type in the term, and it'll pop up right there. You'll see what I'm talking about. But the poll, Arab Americans up to the Latino up or tied, and just the demographics for Democrats this time around just are not good. So I got interrupted. Let me take a quick drink here. So what we can do here real quickly, let's just jump over to this feed here. Let's go through some of these clips here from the Rogan podcast. And I'm just going to go through some of these, and I want to show you a little bit about what happened and just see which ones we think we want to look at. Some of these are kind of long, and I don't want to play them all, but let me see.
These are old systems, and that they're much more capable of making even better systems. But it's a difficult political issue because you think nuclear power, you think Chernobyl. That's what everybody does. They have this connection. They had the potential
or Fukushima,
disaster, Fukushima,
where you're not supposed to enter the land for 3,000 years or something.
It's I think it's worse than that. I think that area is like.
Sorry, I'm gonna play another video. That's not a good one. Let me come up here some more.
Going to be radioactive for probably longer than you could imagine. But
let me find one that's actually.
Who's the greatest UFC fighter? Are you allowed to say in your opinion?
So they're talking a little bit about boxing here. I'm just trying to find some that actually get into. So he actually had a speech last night as well. And by the way, I like what he's wearing. He's wearing the same outfit that he wore on the podcast. He's got a black coat there. It's a suit coat. And it's got a gold Make America Great Again hat. That is totally, I can get one of those hats. Let me find a clip that's actually, let's do this one here. Let's do this one here.
They want to go to all electric cars, but they have brownouts every weekend,
Well, right after they made the announcement that as of 2035, you're not going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine in California. Like within a month, they had some announcement asking people to not charge their Teslas. Because the grid couldn't handle it. Well, how are you going to handle it?
I will terminate the mandate immediately. Just a mandate.
Thank you.
That will be done, I would say, in my first day, maybe 2 days. They want to.
That's an interesting thing that he talks about, Joe Rogan, is that. So if you look at movies, if you look at particularly series on TV, a lot of them that have complex storylines, whatever. Like if you look at, just you'll see this trope. It's a trope. So if you're a writer and you want to tell a story, you want to let the audience kind of know what's happening without being obvious, like looking at the camera saying, this means this. You have a character that you design that is a character that is speaking for the audience so that they can tell you what's going on in terms of exposition. exposition mean we're going to explain to you what's happening without really telling you what's happening. And so what Joe Rogan does, I said before, he's like he is our he's that character for us. He is that person in a TV show or a movie who's explaining to us the common sense thing as to what this is. He's calling it out and putting it out there. And the way he framed that in such a way, it would never get onto your mainstream media at all. Let me find another clip here. This is an interesting one. So you have the left. And by the way, I mentioned this before. When I was, on college campuses, whatever, doing like we had something called Morals Week, which was a week-long event where we every day at a university, we would go there and we'd do stuff like a PETA day where people eating tasty animals day. So, and this is back in like 2012, right? So we have a grill and we have like free food for everybody. Or we have another day for like reverse discrimination day for like if you're white, the the burger costs $20, and we make it different based on how you looked, and it just caused a lot of controversy and stuff like that. So one of the events we did was on was dealing with foreign policy, and of course back then, Dick Cheney was the enemy of the left, of Democrats particularly. But now he is a poster child. So let's click on this link here and hear what Trump has to say.
And why would Muslims
All right, guys. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Let's see what's going on here. So if you guys can hear me in the chat, let me know. In fact, let me test right here. Check one. All right, we're good. I have no idea what happened there. So I lost most of the feed there. So anyway, I forgot what I was talking about. But let's just we could probably do it now, and it's probably a good thing to do. Is probably take your break now, and when we come back, I will set the stream up to talk about the election, talk about the actual 50 states, because I'm sure some of you are coming on for that. You want to wait forever, hear me talk about rambling, whatever. So I'm gonna take 5 minutes here, and I'm going to set everything up because I had to do a reboot. And then when I come back, I will go through the 50 states and District of Columbia, and I will do that. So let me answer some questions real quickly, just so you guys don't have to wait too long for that. Do you think he can flip Maryland? No. No, he won't flip Maryland. No, in fact, I don't think Maryland will be flipped. Probably. Well, Nixon took it, and I think Reagan didn't take it either. But no, I think Maryland's out of reach. The thing about Maryland is that there's just too much cosmopolitan stuff going on there. Same thing with Massachusetts, Vermont. It's one of these areas. It's just in its government ties and so forth. So it would take Baltimore coming down a lot actually, and I think even Montgomery County as well, and PG County as well. But I can see Maryland getting close. I mean, if you look at Jersey is probably going to be under 10, and New York may be like 11 or 12. So if that kind of jump can happen, then Maryland can definitely go, but just not this time. But I'll tell you one thing. Here's one thing. This question was raised by Dina. If we fix our election integrity, I think all things are open at that point. And one thing that Rogan talked about really well on the podcast, I'll talk about this real quickly, is that the reason why cheating happens is because their policies suck. And that was the main reason why I want to talk to you guys, because that's it. They've gone so far to the left that they can't possibly get people to go along with what they believe because their policies are garbage, absolutely garbage. And so they have to do alternative things. And the political elites, the military industrial complex, big ag, big pharma, the globalists, the ones who want to go out and start wars everywhere because of, for whatever reason, to enrich themselves, to expand their territory, to maintain power. All of that's together. And that's part of the swamp. And that swamp's been going on all the way back since the Garden of Eden, essentially. I mean, since mankind has pretty much been in place, we're going to have allegiances and swamps, and it has to be broken up. And I'm reading a book. I mentioned this many times on the channel. It's by Larry Schweikart. It's called Dragon Slayers. It's the 6 presidents' war against their particular swamp. And these 6 presidents had their own swamp. Yet Abraham Lincoln, who had the swamp of the abolition swamp dealing with slavery, the slavery industrial complex. And he brings up how much money was involved in slavery. He talks about Grover Cleveland, who was dealing with the spoil system swamp, people giving favors to and from. Talking about Teddy Roosevelt, talking about the trusts and the monopolies and how they were doing things and how those, and a lot of these things just morphed themselves into others. He talked about Robert F. Kennedy, or JFK. I say Robert F. JFK talking about the industrial complex. Reagan dealing with his own swamp with the political class around the globalists and the industrialists. And of course, Trump has his own swamp as well. And so they're enormously difficult to break up. But the good thing about Trump, quote unquote, losing in 2020, in some ways, I'll say this now, since it's I'll say it now. It's almost, I'm even can't believe I'm saying this. If he wins and gets inaugurated and sworn into office, I'll caveat all that. 2020, that election was probably a good thing, because I'm not sure how he would have broken the swamp up the way he's going to do in 2024, 2025 without that happening. We had to break that egg to make that omelet coming later. We had to see the lengths at which the government would come after us, the lengths at which the government would use lawfare and warfare, the lengths at which the government would come after our kids and our values, the lengths at which they would lock us up, incarcerate us, demonize us, cancel us, take our money, go after our welfare, gaslight us, tell us it's raining when we know something else is coming on our head. You know, those are the kind of things that had to have happened. Not to mention the mass turmoil with the election. Well, the contrast between May of 2000 into George Floyd and into the election itself, and how civil disrupt happened everywhere. And so that's what had to have been seen. So now the gig is up, the veil is off, the gloves are off, and now the opinion of the general person who has common sense, which this election is all about common sense, knows what's going on. And when he wins the election next week, I feel he will, then he will have this type of mandate to do what he has to do. I saw a thing that Robert F. Kennedy posted where he was talking to Trump and how he talked about how before he came on the campaign, how he was suing Trump left and right. And Trump actually did him a solid. I think he flew him somewhere, gave him a favor or whatever, even though he was being sued by this guy. And he started talking, and he told RFK, and he kind of mentioned this a little bit in the podcast. He said, I didn't do it right. These appointments that I made, you know, you have to make so many of them. I picked many people that I wish I hadn't. And we won't do that again. We're going to do it right this time. And that's what I think is going to happen. So he's going to let RFK do his thing, stay off the oil aspect of it, because he and RFK don't agree with on the oil thing, but anything about make America healthy again, I think that's what's going to be on point. And I think if you get, you know, Tucker involved, can you imagine if Tucker Carlson was the White House press secretary? Can you imagine that? Or if even better, let's say if Junior was the press secretary. Oh my gosh, how cool would that be? And Tulsi Gabbard, she can have her thing dealing with military, and it could be really, really good. And I think I think I was talking about tariffs before. So let me finish up on tariffs with McKinley. So anyway, real quickly. So with tariffs, McKinley was a president prior to 1913. 1913, I believe they had the amendment for income tax. And I didn't realize this, but Trump said in this podcast that we were being pressured by our enemies overseas to get rid of the tariffs because it was hurting them. So let's swap out the tariffs for income tax. And we actually end up losing money. Prior to the income tax, we were making boatloads of money that we didn't know what to do with. And it ended up going downhill from there. And that's its own separate swamp in and of itself. So anyway, guys, so I talked about that. And let me ask some questions here, if there are any. Yeah, sorry about that. I had tech issues. My internet totally went down. And I made what I do is I actually had to switch out my Ethernet cable and go to the Wi-Fi, because I have a router upstairs, which is bringing it in. So that was more stable than the actual direct cable coming in. So anyway, the whole thing just totally flat out died. So that's what happened there. Let's see. Yeah, and that's the point I was going to say there too. That video I was showing, thank you so much, Nicholas, is that it's just the hypocrisy. They don't care. They don't care. Whatever it takes to move their agenda, they have no care in the world. Yes, he also doubled down on the enemies within comment, which means that that's not hurting him. Whenever the left says something that he says, and he doesn't shy away from it and doubles down, it means that he's okay on message. Sometimes he'll say something and he won't say it again, right? There's at one point in time where he wouldn't talk about the jab anymore. He doesn't talk about that anymore, does he? Because it's not popular and it's not right, and he's learning about that whole scenario. And Barron Trump, his son, told him, dude, get off of that. That's not going to work. And he was brought in by other people like Richard Barnes, and like there's a survey that was done by Big Data Polling about medical freedom that was put on his desk. And he realized, wow, this is what people want. It's a survey showing what Americans want about freedom in terms of speech, censorship. And the survey came out there, very well done. I have it on the, if you go on Locals, I actually uploaded it there. And there's like 4 surveys out there. And I pulled it down, I put it up on our site so you can have it and see it. Because it's kind of hard to find, because I think this has been kind of taken off the internet and Big Data Polling doesn't have the whole thing out there either. So I had to find it in other ways. But the point is, Trump saw these numbers that the common working man and woman person were saying and having issues with in terms of medical freedom, religious freedom, medical freedom, freedom of speech, and whatnot. He saw that and he realized, you know what? We got to bring in a Tulsi Gabbard. We got to bring in RFK. We got to bring in, Tucker Carlson. We got to bring in Elon Musk. And that's the coalition that we're seeing now. It's that vertical realignment. They don't agree with each other ideologically, not much, but they all love America and they all have common sense and they all have ideas of what the man and the oligarchs are doing to us. And that's the pulse of what people are wanting now. So, yeah. All right. So one more comment and then we'll take a quick break here. He told us it's all right. Yeah, because he was not getting an applaud on that stuff anyway. I was like, the crowd was crazy, man. Yeah, whatever. And he mentioned that, like, yeah, dog, we ain't quite there with you on that. So, and he learned. And he was told by the wrong people many things. Now he's the president. He's accountable. So I'm not carrying his water for him, but he's still a human being, right? And so he's also consider that Trump's coming from the old school mentality from back in the day when vaccines were like everything. They were true vaccines, right? In the scientific nature of it. So I think he got caught up with some of that too, being from himself, being from a mindset where the Hoover Dam could get built, where the Erie Canal could get built, where we could land ourselves on the moon. And some of you might not believe that, but those big projects that America did was something that exceptional that we did. And he comes from that mold. And so he thought, okay, we have this big pandemic. Let's fix it. Let's do it this way. Let's save these companies and let's do this great thing, even though it's going to cost me probably an election potentially because of the economy being tanking, even though after the fact, the stock market still went up after all of that. So I commend him. I know where he's coming from, but I know where he was right and where he was wrong. And that's it. Fauci, come on. That was a disaster. Anyway, I'll stop there. Let's take a look at this here. This is Dewey. Did you say something else, Dewey? That got the tail end of that? Okay, so it says, and it will continue to happen until the Republican Party stands up and does something. We're in power. Now it will have a weak speaker in the House. Basically, we do not have a speaker. Now, good point. Yeah. And they mentioned in the podcast too, a third party system, how it doesn't really work when you have, a president who's independent, who doesn't have anyone on the side. I mean, look at James Polk, one of my favorite presidents of all time. He's a Democrat, but he got stuff done. He had 4 years, but he alienated everyone. He was a Jacksonian person. He tried to bring in the Jacksonian type of governance. He aligned with him, but he also alienated both parties. I believe it was the Whig and the Democrats. And he basically was his own person. And he only had 4 years to do what he had to do. So Trump is going to be very much in the same mold, but he will have a party that will back him. And I think, I'm pretty sure that we're going to increase the majority in the House. I wouldn't have said that 3 months ago, because back then, 3 months ago, a lot of Republicans, congressional leaders, were running away from Trump, whether on message or in the polling, 2 or 3 points. So I was like, well, what does that mean? And the Senate, I think, is pretty much a lock there to at least maintain the majority, if not increase a couple seats there as well. So that being said, these new House members coming in, getting a decent speaker. I think I heard someone saying that, I think I saw Rand Paul, maybe, but Rand Paul's not a senator. I mean, he's not a congressman. I don't know. But anyway, a good House speaker would be fantastic. And because the House speaker is so important. Because without the House speaker, stuff don't get into committees, stuff don't get out of committees, stuff don't get called to the floor. They're the parliamentarian, essentially. They're running the meeting. They can call the agenda. They can do whatever the heck they want. And they can do all kinds of stalling tactics. It's only 2 years. So you got to have a person like a Newt Gingrich come in there who is going to be in line with the agenda for America. When Gingrich came in, when the Republicans swept in 94, I believe, Newt Gingrich came on the scene. And at the time, I was a Democrat. I couldn't stand him. But I respected the fact that he was doing something. It was a contract with America. And he worked with Bill Clinton, prodded him, made him do it. And he ended up becoming pretty decent when it comes to welfare reform because the Republicans dragged him. And anyway, he needs the White House, but he has to have a good, sound speaker who's going to be lockstep in with him in terms of getting measures on the floor, everything else. In terms of the Senate, they're the ones that are going to be doing the personnel stuff. They need to get through these appointments, these judges and justices, or judges. If they are justices, that'd be nice because it'd be nice to have some more Supreme Court justices if possible. But those judges need to come on and get confirmed as quickly as possible. Now, one thing I said last week, I think, Mitch McConnell, I'm not a fan of him at all. However, he did one thing and one thing well, and we all owe him a debt of gratitude for this. Mitch McConnell, the one thing, he pushed the envelope so much to get those confirmations through for those justices. He held, because what would happen is the Democrats wouldn't either come into session or they would more or less stall and not have enough time to be in town for a vote. So what Mitch McConnell did, he extended the sessions longer, forcing them to get to the part in the agenda where they actually push these people through. He did that very, very effectively. But that's basically where my praise goes with Mitch McConnell. Otherwise, I think he's no good. But that's what we need, guys. You get that 4 years if possible. Because as you all know, executive orders means nothing. And we can't guarantee the fact that JD would get in. We can't guarantee the fact that, let's say, a Vivek gets in, or let's say a DeSantis, choose your conservative. I'll say one more thing here before the break. And that is, I think we need a convention of states. It's in the Constitution. It's one of the last things they did when they ratified the Constitution. They realized, you know what, guys, everything looks great. Checks and balances and everything look fine. Woohoo, that's awesome. But what happens if the government goes corrupt? How do we fix the Constitution or change the Constitution if the government is corrupt? What do we do then? So they decided to put in what they call a convention of states. And what it is a mechanism in place. It's never been done before. But you have to, I believe it's 2/3 of the state legislators get together outside of Congress, outside of the U.S. Senate, outside of the U.S. president, outside of any attorney general, outside of any governor. None of those guys or gals are part of this. It's totally independent with the state legislators. Once you get enough people or enough buy-in to this, votes to this, you pick a spot, you have a convention of states. I'm not sure how long it is. It's very vague, but you identify that, and then you put in place the policies and the new amendments to the Constitution that you're going to ratify outside of anybody else. And there's nothing that anybody else can do about it. No judge, nothing. That's how you do it. Our founding fathers were absolutely brilliant. And I know people on the right will say, that will never happen. And there's a lot of pushback from the establishment, Republicans saying that's not, that's not good for different reasons. Well, you know what? What do you think about now? I'm talking about people from 20 years ago who said that's ridiculous, that's never going to happen, who cares, it's dumb, it's bad, it can be worse off than it is. I don't think so. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put behind the paywall on my local channel, I'm going to put the top 10 constitutional amendments that I would like to see out of a constitutional states. I have it written up, actually. I'm going to put it out there. If you join for like a buck a month or so, that's the minimum, I think, then you can check that out and download it and look at it. But that's important, guys. And anyway, so I'll ask one more question. Okay, yep, let's do it. Okay, all right, guys, let's take a quick 5-minute break. And if it's longer than 5 minutes, I apologize. If it's longer than 5 minutes, it's only because I haven't gotten my stuff set up yet. I have a couple things I want to set up so that it will actually work properly. So when we come back here, we're gonna stay on YouTube and Rumble. We're still on X. We're on Facebook still. Okay, cool. So we'll stay on all those platforms. We won't leave. We'll stay on YouTube. But when we come back in 5 minutes or a little bit more, we will go over the election prediction. I'm going to go over each state as it's been aggregated across multiple polling agencies like Big Data Polling, Traffic Group, Rasmussen. There's a couple more in there I'm thinking about. Oh, Atlas Intel. And I'll show you those numbers for each state. And then we'll end the feed. So, all right, guys, I'll see you guys in about 5 minutes or a little bit more. All right, buddy, we're back. So welcome to the second part of our live stream here. And I apologize for the little difficulties we had there. So as you see right there, kind of a spoiler, this is going to be, I'm going to show you the actual numbers as they come up. And hopefully this will work right. I've been trying to practice this and do this right. It's very challenging. If I should take a screen print of this to show you what it looks like. Just see my screen. So anyway, so what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to bring up the election map here. And let me do that right now. I should have done it earlier, but oops. Let me do that real quickly. Let me present this guy. I had to reboot, so everything would have to be redone, literally. So let's bring this up. And show that. And let's pull it at the stage. All right, cool. So let me make sure you can see this. You can't see that, so let me do this. Sorry, guys, just setting this up, so otherwise it's not going to make much sense. All right, give me a second. There we go. Let's go with that. All right, there we go. Cool. All right, so here's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully it'll work. Can you see the thing on the screen? Looks like you can. If there's anything happening on the screen that doesn't look right, let me know. So I'm not going to go through a lot of explanations here. You can look at the other videos to explain what's going on. I'm not going to explain electoral college. I'm not going to explain. I will explain, I guess, a little bit that states are split up. Some of them are like Maine and Nebraska. You have various districts in those. You have at-large, and then you have districts. So Maine and Nebraska have them broken up. And so electoral college has mainly deal with how many senators you have, which is 2, except for DC, and how much population you have. So the bigger the state, the more electoral college votes you have, which essentially they're people who go vote after the election to send those votes of who they represent in terms of the population of their candidate. So if, let's say in California, if Trump wins 55% of the population in the voting rights, then the Republican delegates will go to the California House and they will cast those votes those 54 votes to California, to the Anaheim or Sacramento, whoever the capital is, Sacramento, and that would go over to DC. All right. Anyway, so let's keep going here. So we're going to start from left to right, and we're going to go through the states as they are right now, and this is how I see them. And so I'm going to call out the actual state, the electoral college votes that you get with the EV, whether it's safe or not, and the margin in which I expect Trump or Kamala to win by. And so we're going to go from the Democrat states from the West Coast on out to the East Coast, and then we'll start over and do the same thing for Trump. So we can go through this pretty quickly, but you'll get it. And when we get to the swing states, there's 7 or 8 of those. Technically, there's about 5. We'll talk about those in a slower time frame. All right, so here we go. So Washington is going to be electoral college votes of 12, and that's going to be a margin of 12 for Kamala. It's like that's showing up. I'm sure that's showing up right. Let me just make sure it's working right. That's not working right. So let's do that. All right. So okay, Oregon's next, and that's electoral college votes of 8, likely for Democrats to win that by let's say 10. California, a lot of people are thinking that this is something that Trump could cut into. I think if he gets 20%, I think that'd be great for him. It puts California in play in about 8 years or so. But with the way California is doing the ballots, we need integrity in California specifically. All right. And part of my constitutional amendments, 2 of them are involving election integrity. Colorado, a state that's hasn't been won by a Republican in a long time. I think that's going to be pretty tight, but I don't think it's going to go over very well for Trump. I think he'll lose that by 5 for 10 electoral college votes. Illinois, 15. I think Kamala will win that by 15. That's going to be a safe state for Illinois. And Also, I'll mention this, that safe basically means 11 or better in terms of margin. So if you're winning a state by 11, I'm considering that to be safe, especially now considering we're only 8 or 9 days out. All right, next state's going to be Vermont for 3 electoral college votes, and that's going to be 31. So let's color these in. I didn't do that. So let's color in Washington. Let's fill this. Let's do all these. These are safe yet. So let's do the Oregon, California. I think we did Vermont. And what else did we do? Illinois. And Colorado. All right, so there we go there. So let's come back down to Colorado and let's click on this. And next state, we're going to do New Jersey. Now, this is what I said earlier. I think will be under. I think this will be under single digits, double digits. So I think we're talking about. First, let me just check real quick, guys. Make sure my microphone is in the right one, because I don't want to do the same thing I did last time. So let me just do a quick check here on my microphone. Yep, just want to check. All right, so I think New Jersey, I think we got a shot there of getting under 8. And if things really go squirrely for the Democrats, you know, they could be in trouble there. So for now we're gonna call New Jersey as safe for 8 points for 14 electoral college votes. So let's keep going here. Let's come down to DC. Did this before. DC is going to be 74. Let me fix this again, guys. I'm sorry. This is really. Once you do it one way, if you don't do it right, it's going to mess up. So let me come back to New Jersey. All right, so let me. Nope, that's not going to work either. I got to fix that. Thank you for your patience. We'll keep it there. I don't care you seeing the one behind it. So Massachusetts is going to be 26 for Harris. That's a state that's really going to be tough to win. Colorado, let's do all these actually, so you can see it. It'd be easier to do it this way. That way, if I mess up, it's not a big deal. So let's come down to Colorado. I'm sorry, it's Connecticut. It's going to be 12 for Connecticut. And right now, if you can see, or can you see? You probably can't see that. Right now, she's at 138 electoral college votes to Trump 0. Rhode Island, we have that for 12 margin for 4 electoral college votes. And the problem I'm doing is, all right, so 16. So Maine District 1 is going to be a 16-point margin for Maine District 1 for can y'all just see that? Okay, let's do this. I may just have to get rid of this, guys, and not just do it the old-fashioned way and just tell you. Otherwise, I'm gonna be messing with this forever. So let me just try and do this. If this doesn't work, I'm just gonna have to tell you, and you have to watch it. Let's see. Do this, and let's expand this. Let's just do this. As it changes, it changes. That's much better. All right, so let's just start with that. So right now, Rhode Island at not quite there yet. Maine 1, and that's here we have that's 1 for 16. Maryland, that question was asked today. I think Trump actually loses that by about 26 points. Delaware for 3 electoral college votes. I think that's going to go to Kamala Harris for 10 points, and that's going to be closer because Joe Biden's not running. New York, I'm on a limb there, 8. If things go really, really bad, this could be under 10 points for Harris. Probably gonna be more like 11 or 12. But like I said before, with the numbers that are happening with young Black and Hispanic men, just shaving off those numbers, that's a possibility, and that's terrifying the left. So let's color it in as safe for now. And even though I'm having it as likely, we'll keep it as safe for now. And for Hawaii, it's also going to be safe, even though that's one of the hardest swinging right states in the country, Hawaii. It's gotten redder than any state, even though it's still enormously Democrat. So right now, I think this is going to be her ceiling right here. So this is right now, she's at 188. I'm missing something here. What am I missing? I'm missing DC. Am I missing DC? Yep, that's it. Should be more than that. I've done this enough time to know that. Yeah, 191. So that right there is where I believe Kamala Harris will get no matter what. And I think everything else is literally up in the air. She's doing that poorly. So let's come down to some of the Trump states here. Let's start with Montana. That's going to be safe for Trump at a margin of 22. Let's go to Idaho. I'm sorry. Let's go to Idaho. That's going to be a safe margin of 38 for 4 electoral college votes. Let's go to Wyoming. It's going to be a 50 margin for Trump at a safe margin, and that's going to be 3 electoral college votes. Utah, they're coming back home to Trump. They're coming more and more Trumpian, whereas before they were Romneyan and so forth. So that's going to be a nice, safe 28-point margin. North Dakota, South Dakota will do those together. Both 3 electoral college votes. North Dakota is going to be 42, and South Dakota is going to be 34. Let's go to Nebraska at large. We'll do all 3 in Nebraska together. In fact, I'll just do them all, and I'll just color them in. So Nebraska at large will be 5. 1, 2, and 3 will be a 1 for electoral college votes. And you'll see pretty much all of these go to Trump, except for maybe Nebraska 2. If Virginia gets tight, he'll get all of these. But for now, we're just coloring all of Nebraska as, right now we're going to add in a different color palette for that. We'll color that in as leans, for Nebraska too. So that covers all Nebraska. Let's come down to Kansas. That's going to be safe for Trump at a margin of 22. Oklahoma, I mentioned this a lot. Along with West Virginia, Oklahoma is the most Trumpy state, maybe Wyoming, but in terms of counties, every single county in Oklahoma went for Trump in both 2016 and 2020. Same thing for West Virginia. Trump won every single county in West Virginia in 2016 and 2020. Only 2 states that can say that about any candidate. So he will win Oklahoma by 40. So all of these are going to be called within the first couple of hours of the polls closing. Let's go over to Iowa. This used to be a swing state. Trump will win that by a safe margin of 12. Let's come down to Missouri. Another safe margin. Trump will win that by 24 points. Let's come down to Arkansas. Is that Alaska? That's Arkansas. Yes, Arkansas. That's going to be 32 points for Trump at a safe margin. Let's come down to Louisiana, a very independently driven state. That's also going to be safe for Trump at a margin of 26. Let's come down to Indiana. That's going to be safe for Trump as well at a margin of 20. Right now, he's at 81. She's at 191. West Virginia, I already told you about them. They're very Trumpy. And they're going to come in at 48 margin for 4 electoral college votes. Ohio, another so-called, or used to be, swing state. Remember back in, 2024? No. 04. When Bush was going for re-election, Ohio was that swing state that he needed. And he won that by a fairly close margin, but enough to secure the electoral college vote. Now, Ohio, traditionally speaking, whoever wins that wins the presidency, and Trump will have no problem winning Ohio. You can just tell where people are campaigning. He hasn't campaigned in Ohio, I don't know, in forever. So that's going to be safe at an 11-point margin. Let's come down to Alabama. Now, let me see if there's any questions here. I want to make sure nothing's going on that I don't know about. Is there any comments going on here that I need to know about? Okay. Let me put this up on the screen. I want to make sure, because sometimes my audio goes out or something. I want to make sure that I'm in check with you guys, make sure that something hasn't happened. Wyndham says, Kyle, how do you think the ruling of allowing illegal immigrants the ability to vote? And the last one is, Hale, if you can remind me, mention to me about his speech that he told, I think it was in May of 63, right before he was assassinated in November. It was a very powerful speech that Kennedy did that I thought was just absolutely incredible. But let me answer the first question here. How do I think the ruling of allowing illegal immigrants the ability to vote? Now, if you're referring to the Fifth Circuit, unless something has happened since then last night, yesterday, the Fifth Circuit essentially said, no, here, I'm going to think. So there's a couple things going on. Something going on in Virginia where basically a judge said that you have to allow these, I think 1,200 or how many people there are illegal aliens who are admitted to being illegal, not legal, that they must be put on the voter rolls, even though it's against federal statute and all that. So the governor of Virginia, Youngkin, put out a statement saying, we're going to appeal that to the Supreme Court or whomever is above that. So that would be Virginia. If you're referring to Virginia, it's not going to affect it because Virginia isn't the state that we need. So in this case, the cycle, I don't think it's going to hurt Trump. However, it could help hurt with the popular vote in that regard. Now, in terms of the other deal, I think it was Mississippi, Texas, and one other, I believe, I forget the other state, the Fifth Circuit basically said that you have to be a legal citizen to be counted. Those votes have to be counted that way. So some people are saying that's going to be, overruled. I don't think so, because the next level is the Supreme Court. And I have a statement on X. If you go out there and look at that, just do a search on that as well. Go into the go on X, go to our Twitter feed or X feed and type in fifth, the number 5 TH, and you'll see that come up. And I have a statement there as well that I put out. I think that's going to affect the popular vote. Those states anyway, Mississippi, I believe it was Texas and one other, I don't remember which one it was, but those were going to go Trump anyway. But what I like to see is that opinion be spread across the other appellate districts. And so to answer your question, it's going to help, right? Anytime you have legal people voting, that's good. So it would help us to answer your question. And let me go answer this now before I forget. So just off topic. JFK had a speech. I forget what it's called, but basically he's talking at a university. I believe it's University of Virginia. I watched the speech a few weeks ago. It's very emotional because he's going to get killed a few months later. But he's talking about, nuclear proliferation and about Russia and about, talking and about all these things. And this has happened not too long after the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62. So I'm sure he had a different perspective. And many people think that that's the speech that got him killed. I'm not making that claim. But the things he says in the speech are encouraging, uplifting, a hopeful, peaceful future without, so many nuclear weapons. He wasn't saying get rid of them all. He was just saying, let's take a step back from this escalation, because during the Cold War, which he was in the middle of, it was just, testing. It was just things being ramped up, him and Khrushchev and so forth. If one person does the wrong thing at the wrong time, it could be an accident and we could all be destroyed. There was that story of that submarine, that Russian submarine commander or captain, where he refused to launch the nukes on America because he had something, he wanted more confirmation. And they called him the man that saved the world. And there's been a documentary about it and a movie made about it. But those tensions can happen, and the wrong thing happened. And next thing you know, it's a powder keg. So anyway, that's my thought there as well. I'm actually agreeing with you as well. JFK would not be accepted in the party today by a long shot. So let's go back here. Where would you stop? Alabama, that it? Yep, I think so. Let's pull this down a little bit. I need to change my mouse because my mouse is messing me up. It's like making it more sensitive, and so it's making it bad for the live stream. Kentucky, 34 for 8 electoral college votes. That's going to go for Trump, no problem. Tennessee, 11 electoral college votes, 32, no problem for Trump there as well. Mississippi, 6, and that was part of that 5th district circuit, I believe, at 26. Maine, District 2, that's very, very Trumpy. Actually win that pretty comfortably at, well, it's going to be safe. So Maine District 2 will be safe. Let's come down some. South Carolina, some people are saying that will be in play. Yeah, right. Not this time, and maybe not in 20 years, maybe 20 years they may have it. Alaska, again, that's a weird state, but that should be safe for Trump at 18. Texas, all right, Texas. All right, I have Texas as safe. Most people don't, but I think he wins Texas by at least 11. And when we get to Florida, you're going to see that Texas may run to the left of Florida, that Texas may be running less than Florida. In other words, Florida's going to run more to the right of Texas this time around, I believe. So I'm calling Texas safe. And now we have Trump at 180, Kamala Harris at 191. Speaking of Florida, and I'm just calling Florida safe now. I probably shouldn't, but I am. I'm calling Florida safe. I see him winning Florida by 12. And here's the thing about Florida is that it's almost unbelievable. And now, as we get into the swing states, now's a good time to talk about these things. You can see them there on your screen, so it's not going to be I'm not going to be spoiling. You can see it on your screen there, but that's what I have. But Florida right now, if you look at the early voting, it's absolutely incredible. Now, let me just go into early voting a little bit about, traditionally speaking, how Democrats think about early voting. So before, let's say 2000, where we didn't have, everything was paper ballots, you had machines, but they would punch holes in the paper. Some areas had electric ballots back in 2000, but not many. And so the election process was show up day of and, you vote. There was absentee ballots, especially if you're overseas or if you're in college like I was. I was in North Carolina and I was, in Maryland. That's where I lived. And so I did absentee ballot. And so that was kind of the thing. So the day of election, the Republicans would almost always beat out Democrats in terms of day of election. And which is why one of the reasons why Nixon was killing it, why Reagan killed it, why Bush, to a lesser extent, killed it. But things were changing under Bush a little bit in terms of the makeup of the country. And so we saw in 2000 how Florida was. Florida was becoming a bellwether for the country. And it was, it had, Pensacola was very much, the panhandle over there to the left, over there by Alabama towards Mississippi, very conservative. Tallahassee area, very conservative. But down south, Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, all that area down there, very cosmopolitan, very, very Democrat and so forth, Miami. And so it was one of those kind of things. But you had the I-4 corridor in Orlando. If I'm saying that wrong, let me know. That was kind of the area that was kind of like, teetering to and from. You kind of fought for that corridor, and whoever won that corridor in Florida would win Florida. Not anymore. Dade County right now, Miami-Dade County is going for Trump in early voting by a lot. And why is this important? This is important because of early voting and because of culture. And so if I can explain it this way, before Republicans, we would go up and show up at the polls. We would just show up. Okay, I vote. When do I vote? Okay, I'll be there. Democrats back in the day, the working class. Don't get this wrong. I'm not trying to insult or anything like that. What I'm trying to say is that people in the working class communities, coal mines, unions, factories, trade skills, whatever, they have jobs. And so they have to come home from work and go out and vote. It's a hassle. So getting them out is a little more difficult. Plus, the left embraced a lot of the more lackadaisical, like some of the younger people didn't want to come out to vote. And so turnout for Democrats was always a hard thing. So you would have people like Puff Daddy, you have him say, vote or die. We have these elaborate type of efforts to get people to come out, just show up to vote, because they knew that the low prop voter or the low propensity voter, what that means is the people who vote once every 4 years or less were Democrats. If you just get people to the polls, we're going to win. Obama did that. Get people to the polls, we're going to win. Republicans won on off-year elections, midterms, because they didn't get out to vote on the off-year elections because there's no president on top of the ticket. So there was no incentive. There was no emotional pull. And a lot of times, let's just face it, Democrats would fabricate or exploit, let's put it that way, some sort of social issue that happened. Something happened somewhere in some part of the country. Racism. Black folks get mad, marching, voting, and getting screwed after the fact. Every single time. But they didn't care because they got their vote. So, but now it's different now. And here's why it's different. Here's why it's critical to understand this. Why voting now is so difficult, and not difficult, why it's so different now is that what Trump was able to do, and God bless him, he went against the establishment, the buttoned-up collar, conservative. And I'm conservative, but I'm talking about conservative in terms of lifestyle, in terms of clothes, wear, speech. Conservative, not ideology-wise, but conservative, button-up, and this country club mentality that's been going on since Calvin Coolidge all the way up to Nixon and so forth. But establishment, right? And a lot of them were in bed with the Democrats. So there was very little distinguishing. So when Trump came in, I said, look, what are we doing? How about some common sense stuff? And so he got that white working class group of people, the same people that I told you about before, those 200 counties that were voting all the way Democrat every single election cycle on back to Dukakis, 88 and so forth. And maybe even before that, they suddenly flipped to Trump in 2016, and that gave him the election. Well, guess what? That's going to happen again, but this time it's going to be low prop voters for Hispanics and Blacks, working class, under 50 in particular, and others that don't come out. So what you're seeing now, you don't see a big, massive Democrat get out the vote campaign across the board, because they know the low prop voters are Republicans now. Trump has transformed everything. He's realigned everything through the power of his will, through the power of his efforts, and through people realizing, wow, this party is stronger than it's ever been before, because we're identifying now with the working class, the class that the Democrats kicked to the curb. I'm reading a book now. It's called Game of Thorns. It's the election of 2016. It's behind the scenes what happened with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton weeks leading up to her loss, and how Bill Clinton was trying to raise the red flag, say, hey guys, hello, these numbers aren't adding up. And Hillary was like, oh yeah, well, forget you. I'm planning my fireworks thing over at Javits Center. So you need to relax, Bill. We got this thing. But he's screaming and telling them, look, these numbers don't look good. We're losing the white middle class, urban class, working class person. We're losing them. We're losing the farmers. We're losing the people in these areas. And this is a problem. And they didn't listen to him. Not that they could do anything about it anyway, because Trump already had the messaging. Excuse me. But that was the thing. And so now it's gotten worse for them. Since the past 4 years, they've alienated them even further. If you're white, you're racist. If you're this, you're that. If you're this, people are tired of being lectured to by these oligarchs. We're sick of it. Why do you think Hollywood did so poorly with Disney, with Star Wars, with Indiana Jones, with all these woke things, with all these culturally appropriated things that are going on in media? Why do you think that's blowing up? That's all tied together. So the same people that are mad at Star Wars being destroyed, the same people who are mad at Star Trek being destroyed, same people who are being mad at, let's say, Marvel and all the, being destroyed, or Doctor Who, or seeing Spider-Man being destroyed, or Superman, or any of these characters that they love, Indiana Jones being destroyed, being basically subservient to another character who can't hold his jock. That's what's going on here, guys. It's across the board, across all facets. People who are mad at LeBron James and NBA, same people who are mad at this kneeling at these NBA and these NFL events, this Black Lives Matter stuff, kowtowing to an organization that's going bankrupt after losing $11 million, building houses, the founders building houses, and then lecturing you about this, and then talking about let's get rid of all the cops while we're at it. Is across the entire culture. People are sick and tired of this. So it goes beyond just politics. You're going to see an influx of everyone who's mad about anything I just mentioned before. You look at a channel like Nerdrotic, one of the biggest YouTube channels out there dealing with comic books, movies, pop culture. This guy was, he's obviously a liberal, or at least he was. I'm not sure where he is now. He was in California for many years. He ran a comic book store in California, I believe. I'm saying this wrong. Correct me. But he was getting doxxed by his own people and attacked by his own people for talking about why the movie Captain Marvel, or the reason why Spider-Man, or the reason why Star Wars sucked. Oh, you're just saying this. You're just some white male, whatever. And so guess what he did? He got a U-Haul truck and moved. He moved out of California. He couldn't take it anymore. And now his channel is blown up even further. But that sentiment across, they call it the fandom menace. It's Star Wars play on Phantom Menace. But this community of people who aren't conservative per se, but they'd hate to see the product that they like be destroyed with bad storytelling, because you have to put a person in there to fill in 4 or 5 checkboxes. And you just screw the whole story up. Disney is a great example. They've had like 8 or 9 movies in a row that lost money. I think the only one they had recently was Deadpool, only because that was, the IP is so strong. But before then, they just trashed it, And so that's what we're seeing here across the board. And it's going to manifest itself in a way that I don't think anyone knows right now. I think it's all going to come to head on Tuesday. And it's going to be a shock to many people around here. And it's going to be a backlash from all of this. I'm seeing it. It's not just that; it's the knitting community. I think Catherine, I can't remember her name, but there's a person that I have on my channel where I did a video on. If you know her name, put her in the chat here. But she is was a person who was part of this knitting community, like knitting, like clothes and scarves. And she decided to go to a Trump rally way back when, and she got destroyed by her own people. And now she has a semi-conservative podcast. It goes on and on. The whole walk away movement is part of that. Tulsi Gabbard's part of that. RFK Jr. is part of that. I'm telling you right now, we're going to see something major happen on Tuesday, and it's all going to come to head because people are sick and tired. Anyway, I'm sorry I kept going there, but Florida is going to go red. Georgia. The thing about Georgia is, the good thing about Georgia is that we don't have the same thing that happened in 2020 happening now. You saw a clip there in the very beginning of Warnock, who ran against Herschel Walker, senator, and his campaign down in Georgia in 2020 was powerful. It was in there with Joe Biden, of course, because he was on the ticket. You had another senator on the ticket as well. So it was 2 senators running, I believe, in Georgia that year, and you had Stacey Abrams as well. And her network, which is very, very powerful, by the way. Don't sleep on Stacey Abrams. She is a powerful person that needs to be watched. She's a force to be reckoned with. So if we don't, get integrity in play, she's going to be a major problem for conservatives from here on out. So Georgia doesn't have that. They put in some pretty good election integrity laws. They have a Republican governor. The climate isn't the same. They don't have the get out the vote thing that they had before because of those things as well. And let me say this also about elections when it comes to this, is that I think I didn't finish my thought the last time. So in terms of the election, let me go back to what I was going to say before, but the whole thing about the comic books, whatever, was that because conservatives are the ones that are the working class ones now, we are now the low prop voters. And so what we're seeing now in the numbers is that people who are low propensity voters, vote maybe one time or less in 4 years, are breaking to Trump by like 80%. So you're not seeing this huge get out the vote thing because Democrats do not want a high turnout this time. They don't. They do not want a high turnout. They want to play to their base, which is why Kamala is saying what she's saying. She's not stupid. I mean, she's not, because if she was stupid, she would say, yes, I hate fracking, I hate this, I hate that, I hate this. She would say what she wants. That would be stupid. What's smart is word salad, talk around the subject, and hope that the media has your back. At the same time, playing to your base, getting them uproar, talking about Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini and blah, 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 blah. Get them up in arms so they would get out to vote. Because she knows her only chance to win this election, other than the other thing, is to get her base out. And if she doesn't talk too much, she won't piss off her base. Because she says one thing about Israel, she pisses off one half. She says something about Palestine, she pisses off the other half. So she's talking word salad in a socialist manner. Listen to what she's saying. She's talking about things that have a socialist, communist root. My friend Chad talked about this in a short about how Kamala's wording is right out of the Communist Manifesto. And so that's what's going on there. So, and like I said, if she was smart, she would absolutely do what she's doing. But unfortunately for her, she's just a bad candidate. Now, I think maybe Newsom could do it a little bit better because he's more of a personality, whatever. So she has personal deficiencies. Every politician gives you word salads. She's just terrible at giving them. She's terrible at thinking on her feet. So as a candidate, as a personal candidate, she's bad, period. And that's her detriment. If they had someone like a Josh Shapiro in there, this would be a tight race. We'd be on pins and needles. But because Josh Shapiro he's in Pennsylvania. Is it Josh? I think it's Josh Shapiro, or his last name Shapiro. If he was on the ticket, then, or he was ahead of the ticket in terms of him instead of Kamala, razor thin stuff, guys, razor thin stuff, because Trump is at a disadvantage because of the other thing I won't mention here on YouTube, but because the media is just carrying the water for these people. And it's so difficult to do this because you have low information voters who don't care. They're going to vote blue no matter what. And we're running out of people with common sense that have a voice to be heard, which is why Joe Rogan's podcast was so important, to get it out there for 3 hours, unfiltered, unedited. You can see that he's not Hitler, he's not Stalin, he's not Mussolini, and make a decision for yourself. So, yeah. All right, so where are we? Okay, let me get back to what I was saying before about knock and grab. Georgia. So, early voting. So, what the Democrats are trying to do is something called knock and grab. So, the people of their base, typically low props, they would knock on the door and say, have you voted yet? No. They would grab them by the collar and take them to the polls. That's why they want a long time frame for early voting. They would love to have time. They would love to have 5 months early voting. They would love it. What? They would love it. That's why they can't do day of, because they can't knock on the door and grab them. That's why, guys. That's why. And COVID gave the perfect cover for all of that stuff. People were scared to go outside. They wouldn't do mail-ins and whatever. And it showed a major hole in our process. So that's that. So let's keep going. You can already see here for yourself where I'm going with this. So there's no need to say. Arizona, I have here another state that Turning Point USA is just killing it out there. I mean, they're handing Maricopa County on a silver platter. Arizona is going to be 6 points or better. And if it goes higher than 5, Nevada is going to go as well. I'll just jump ahead for Nevada as well. Nevada, the polling there, early voting there is driving them crazy. We haven't had a Republican win Nevada since, I believe, Bush in 2004, I believe. So, yeah, so that's not good for them. Even though I'm gonna color this different color though, so I can keep it. I think it's gonna be more like that. I think Arizona would be more like a little bit darker than, yeah. Even though I had it the same way. No, let's make them the same. Okay, that's bold to make it likely for Nevada. No, I have it lean. I'm sorry, I have it lean. Okay, that's right. So let's have Nevada as a lean, and that will be at 3 points. All right, so let's come back to North Carolina. I said early on in channels on this program, I've said all along for several months now. If you've heard this, you know I tweeted it, I texted it, I put it out there and everything. Any poll that you see that has North Carolina as a swing state, take it, ball it up, put it in the trash, or take it, ball it up, put it in your fire pit, and burn it. It's a garbage poll. Never had a chance in North Carolina. Ever. Was not going to happen. So he wins that by at least 8. And if he wins by 8, I have a good article on Mark Robinson. If you guys are interested in Mark Robinson, a friend of mine, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, in the stream here, he's got a legitimate shot. Now, I don't have time to go into all this. I'm not predicting that he'll win, but go to our locals. It's free. The latest article we did out there, the numbers based on early voting, based on a potential R+4 electorate up to as much as R+15 day of electorate, which means basically early voting. Right now, early voting for Republicans right now is anywhere from 0.2% to 3% right now, but it probably will end up being an edge to Democrats as the polls close on the rural areas and they have a chance to catch up during the weekend. But even if election day is like -2 or +2 Democrat on early voting, in terms of there are more Democrats voting early than Republicans are voting early. If it's by a margin of +2 for Democrats, that's not a big deal because election day turnout tends to be upwards of 15% higher. And that's what I'm seeing potentially happen here, if not higher than North Carolina. So if you add those two things together, a election day, early voting election day of 15 or more, and a Trump victory in North Carolina by 8 or more, what that does is it's something called a coattail effect. And it's just math. It's just math. People come in and they end up, voting for the president as well as the governor. Now, North Carolina traditionally doesn't do that. They split the ballot. They choose the president of one party and the governor or senator of another party. It's traditionally what they do. So that's really the biggest factor of him losing Carolina is that happening. However, and I sent this to the campaign. I've sent this all to the campaign. The campaign knows everything that I'm telling you now. I sent them the numbers, the graphs, the charts, everything. And I told them, you need to keep Mark as close as possible with Trump in terms of your messaging. Now, I know Trump and his campaign distance themselves for political reasons because the left use it as a wedge issue. But still, on message, stick with Trump as much as possible. Get that margin of 3 or 4 points where people are running away from Trump to more of a 1 or 2 margin in terms of, so if Trump wins it by 8, Mark he'll win the state in terms of by 6 or so. That's the thought process at least. But he's down like 13. He was down 16 points as of a week and a half ago. Now it's down to 13 points. And one poll had him up 6 points, the Emerson poll, the latest one. And if you look at that trend, given the hurricane, Helene, and he being out there, I mean, he's everywhere. And he's posting every 2 or 3 hours on Facebook and on his website, suing CNN, telling them that this is fake, coming out vehemently against it. And his whole entire campaign staff left. So that's a whole nother story behind that. So he has fresh blood coming on board, and now he's hyper-focused, and he can very well pull this out mathematically. It's going to be tough, but it can happen if those things play out in the article I mentioned on local. So North Carolina is going to go Trump by, I'm hoping, at least 8 or more. The more it goes above 8, the more Mark has a chance. All right, let's go to Nevada. I have that as a lean. I think I already mentioned that already. Sorry. So Pennsylvania. Now let's talk about Scott Presler up in Pennsylvania. He is the main person doing the outreach, the get out the vote effort in Pennsylvania. And I said this before, I'll say it again. if he's able to pull off what he does, if he's able to pull Pennsylvania off the way I think he's going to do, they should be building statues for him in front of the RNC in Pennsylvania. Because, I mean, we're talking about modern day Paul Revere's people. There's the heroes all over the place here doing things of a historic level. And if he can deliver Pennsylvania to this country, to me, it's at the level of a Paul Revere. Because Pennsylvania, a lot of people are saying, and based on the numbers I'm saying here, he's gonna do well where I'm saying here. But Pennsylvania, we're getting to the Rust Belt. He's got to get one of these Rust Belt states to have a legitimate shot, and that would be Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Minnesota. Or Virginia. We'll get to that in a second. But Virginia's not part of the equation right now. But really, people are looking at Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. He's got to win one of those. You know, it's just how the math works out. And if he can deliver Pennsylvania, and he's up in Pennsylvania in many, many different polls, then you're in good shape. Early voting in Pennsylvania, if you compare it to 2020, less Democrats are voting, more Republicans are voting. And that trend is happening absolutely everywhere. There's no case where I've heard where early voting is going on where that is not happening. Now, some states have more information in terms of by party, some don't. So you have to do some conjecturing based on where they're coming from and where the polling areas are from and whatnot. So there's no science in early voting because you don't know exactly who they're voting for because you just don't know. You don't know. So take that with some grain of thought. People are optimistic, but from what I'm saying, I'd much rather be Trump than Kamala. So right now I have it being a lean for Trump at a margin of 4. Wisconsin, the same thing there. Wisconsin is a state that's very difficult to poll. It's very rural, agrarian, and Wisconsin always polls to the left and they vote to the right. An example, I think Trump mentioned this actually in the podcast. I've said this before. The week of the election, Biden was projected to win Wisconsin by 17 points. He quote unquote lost, that is Trump, by less than 1%. He lost by 20,000 votes in Wisconsin. He was projected to win by 17 points 3 days before the election. So if you take these models and put them in place, it just looks really, really bad, horribly bad. Okay, so it gets worse for Democrats. Let's come down to Michigan. Michigan, that brings back bad memories with those 3 a.m. trucks that came in at 3 a.m. with a bunch of ballots coming in there. Michigan, it looks good for Trump as well. In fact, what I'm hearing, and if you go on X right now and look around, you're hearing these reports of people seeing the internal polling of Kamala Harris, and it's in the toilet. And internal polling is polling that campaigns pay for out of their own pockets to get as much accurate information so they can make the most informed decisions they can make in terms of strategic planning. Am I going to go to this bake sale by the women's club here, or am I going to go to this yard sale by the plumbers guild, by these people here? It depends on how you segregate, how you separate who doesn't like you, and how you discriminate. I'm sorry, you discriminate who doesn't like you, and you segregate who you do like. That's the campaign manager's job. In the election, you got to do that. And so good polling is paramount. Without good polling, you can't do that. And so the internal pollings are always going to be better, typically better than your polls that are public polls, like, Marist or like USA Today or the many others. Morning Consult, one of the worst ones. These polls and have basically two purposes. Number one is to raise money. So they want to fund and get as much money as possible, give good polls. And as you notice, they always go to Democrats early on because they want the Democrat candidate who is just running to know or feel that he or she is winning by a good margin. That way they can send those polling numbers to the donors to get more money into the campaign. It's all about money. And then as it gets closer to the election, if the numbers are the same, no harm, no foul, we're good. We made a good poll. If for some reason it's not a good poll and you're wrong, which a lot of times they are, then you come together, you collude with everybody else, and you come down, making margins narrower so that when the election day happens, your miss isn't that bad and you lose your credibility. It's a scam. It's a racket. But internal polling is not. And the internal polling for Kamala Harris, from what I'm seeing, everywhere I'm seeing, is abysmal. Rich Barris of the People's Pundit talks about this. He talked about this a month or so ago. Again, on Locals, I have this documented and links in there as well, what I'm talking about. So right now, you'll see Trump has crossed 312. And this is what I projected in our meeting in the last time I did last week and the time I had prior to that, at Trump winning at 312. And this is pretty much the consensus across the board. Let's color in, what is this? Oh, New Hampshire. Yeah, so everything here is still up in play, even though Trump has it. So you're wondering, why is Trump going to Virginia? Twice, probably. Why is he going to Minnesota yet? I'm not sure about that. But he's going to, he went to California. He's going to New Hampshire, I believe. He's going to Pennsylvania a couple times, we know, Wisconsin a couple times this week, but he's going to Virginia. In fact, he announced that he's going to make his last stop in Virginia. And so I'm going to leave Virginia for the very, very last, because that's the most interesting one to me for many reasons. So New Hampshire, he's going to New Hampshire as well. So I'm going to color in as I have here. So I'm just going to say, as of right now, I still have him particularly losing New Hampshire, even though some people are saying it's already flipped. So I'm not sure what to do there. Maybe I'll keep it gray. No, I'll go with what I have here. Just keep it consistent. Minnesota, another state that he could easily flip. And let's go to New Mexico. Not so easy, but possible. Looking at a 2 margin, and a 3 margin. Let's come down to the last state I'm talking about before Virginia, and that's the Maine at large. Let's go with that being also for Kamala at a lean. All right, so there is probably her ceiling, if you don't count Virginia. Now, I've said this for several months now. No, that's not true. For several weeks, that I feel Virginia is probably the most important state in all of this together for Trump supporter, because Biden won Virginia by around 10 points. Kamala has been polling under that, around 6 or 7, somewhere in there. But recently, 2 polls came out where it's tied in Virginia and her actually being up 1 in Virginia. I have a 4-hour podcast. Let me pull this guy up here. The podcast is, go to Christian Hines. It's Heins. Go to his podcast and check him out. He's got a 4-hour podcast up there about Virginia. He'll tell you everything you need to know about that. And he says in his podcast, he said, look, if Trump gets the same kind of election day turnout that Youngkin got a couple years ago, I guess, whatever it was, then he could win Virginia. And so there's a reason why Trump is choosing Virginia as his last stop. And so for the reason why I feel that it's the most important state is because it's a left bellwether. Every state on this map, other than, let's say, well, every state on this map, other than like the dark blue ones, well, put it this way, every red state that's tinted, like light blue, runs to the right of Virginia. So if Virginia is, let's say, Trump wins by 2, then you could expect all the pink states to, at worst, Trump lose by 1. You follow me? But if it's even or Trump winning Virginia, you can see all those states automatically just turn red because there are more Democrats in Virginia. You have a very rural southern area. You have a very industrial part up north called Northern Virginia. It's a very industrial, cosmopolitan type liberal area, very much similar to Massachusetts and so forth. You know, and so they're going to vote Democrat en masse because you have DC there. But here's the thing that's interesting. This is what's cool about it. And Richmond too. Going back to the Black and Hispanic voters that are in major metropolis or municipalities, major population centers like that, like Richmond, like Nova, Fairfax, those guys, Alexandria, Arlington, those areas like that, they're voting more. They're still voting Democrat. Don't get me wrong, but they're voting less Democrat. Like I said before, they're moving, as of 2 months ago, they were trending 20 points better than Biden in 2020. And that's, again, across the board, no matter where you go. So that's why CNN yesterday was like, yeah, Trump could win the popular vote. That's why. Because California, the only reason why Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, because of the other thing, I won't go there, but LA, the 5 boroughs in LA carried her. And by the way, it's also one of the main reasons why there was a red trickle in 2022, because Act Blue and all these communist organizations went into California, who has, 52, if you take 2 away from 54, 52 congressional seats. So that alone is your margin in the House. So why worry about, New Mexico or Rhode Island or Virginia when you can get all these ultra liberals in California? You can flip the entire House with just California. And that's what she did. And the population centers in LA was enough that carried the entire state, because there was no shaving off those points that I'm saying now about Hispanics and blacks and whites, even in other areas, in the more rural areas or the industrial area, but still working class, but non-religious. And so that's why Trump is going to shave enough points off. And so I can't take credit for this. I'll give this to Rich Barris. He said that if Trump wins Texas by more than 6, and if Florida continues the way it is now in terms of its early voting, then that is enough to offset the numbers that are down in California, which, by the way, California is, again, turning more red. Every state in the country, other than, I believe Colorado caught up, but that's just for sake of me being consistent. Every state in the country, other than Colorado, is moving to the right. Every last one of them. Just not enough to get over the threshold of 50% so it could flip, right? But it's going in a trend that's scaring the living crap out of Democrats, which is why they have to have this mass invasion of people across our border. They even said it. Bill Clinton said it himself. He went to a campaign rally with for Kamala and said, yeah, well, white population. Well, he didn't say white. He said population is down, so we have to bring people in the country. So I mean, it's a known. It's been known for a long time. I mean, and just transparency, the Republicans are to blame too, in terms of going back to Reagan and onward, because labor companies, corporations who were funding a lot of these campaigns wanted the cheaper labor, and the Democrats wanted the votes. So that in and of itself is a swamp. And if Trump had a swamp, that would be a major one, where you had both sides helping each other. Similarly, we had the Whigs helping the Democrats during the antebellum period prior to the Civil War. And they just scratched each other's backs. And it took a Republican Party, a brand new party, by the way, to come up and basically destroy the Whig Party and actually put the Democrat Party into a recession for 60 years. Unfortunately, the Republican Party became massively corrupt over that time period. And Teddy Roosevelt had to come in and try his best to reform that. So anyway, so Virginia, it doesn't matter if we win in Virginia or not, but if we do, it's going to be insane. If he wins, if he loses Virginia by, let's say, 3, it's a landslide, just because this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. If Arizona goes by more than 5, then Nevada is. Nevada is a service-oriented state, and the tax on tips, no tax on tips, is a very, very popular thing there. And the influx of illegals coming across to Nevada is affecting them. Nevada's a very conservative state outside of Vegas, and Arizona's got a big border problem, so that they tie in together. And I'm telling you right now that Ohio, well, not so much Ohio, but let's say Michigan and Wisconsin, they go together. In Pennsylvania, they go together. They vote similarly every single cycle. And if Virginia does the same thing, going to the right, then those states who vote to the right of Virginia are going to be in play. I mean, big time. And so this is the map here, 312. So let's go a little further. If he were to win Virginia, let's say he wins Virginia, then I'm just going to call it here. He wins New Hampshire. He wins Maine. I mean, let's just call it. He wins Minnesota. He darn near wins New Mexico. Colorado gets lighter. New Mexico, I'm not ready to call that yet because it's kind of a different thing there. But if Arizona goes by like 8 or 9, then New Mexico goes. But let's just keep it here. And let's say, again, Maine. Let's go Maine all the way. I don't think he'll win the Maine 2nd district. I don't think he'll win the 1st district. Sorry. So we'll give her that. But that's what I'm thinking you're looking at. And Illinois is also going lighter as well. And, that's going to go light as well. Not leans, but not a dark blue. So that's your map. If he wins Virginia, that's your map. And it would be an amazing time for this country if that were to happen. So I'm going to do another video probably next week talking about, I'll do this only on Rumble. I'm going to do where I go through the entire election as the polls close from, the East Coast to the West Coast, when we can expect things to happen, when things will get called, why things won't get called, because I'm sure there's going to be more verdicts and decisions coming down from upper courts to kind of rein this thing in as the Republican Party keeps filing more of these suits to get them to uphold the law. One thing the Republican Party did was when they split their party up, the leadership up from Ronna McDaniel, who was the RNC chair for the past 2 cycles, totally incompetent, garbage, establishment, clueless, didn't care, hated Trump. But now you have Laura Trump working on the election integrity, and the other side, I forget this guy's name, but he's working on getting the vote out. Splitting it up is great. Laura Trump's all about election integrity. If you saw the movie Vindicating Trump, at the end, Dinesh D'Souza, who made the movie called 2000 Mules, talks about a new way they're trying to steal elections through ballot harvesting at universities in particular, and how they're on top of that and trying to work through that. But the goal is to set the rules up on these different states that are kind of weird and say, this is the playing field. This is what we're going to abide by. This is what you're going to abide by. And we're going to hold you to it. And when they don't hold them to it, they sue the living crap out of them. And what the Democrats did was they went for areas like, I'll leave her around, but I won't say that. But that's the goal. And that's what I will say once we get closer to the election. I'll do a final one, maybe that Monday, as I project the polls closing, because we should have enough laws in place and ideas of what's going to happen with Virginia, what happens with those voters, what's going to happen with the 5th District Court. Is that going to be overturned, or is there going to be another circuit that's going to say something similarly? And if that happens, then we have more assurances of things happening in our favor. But there's nothing that they won't do to stay in power. So just keep that in mind. Things look great, but we got to get through this one somehow. So get out to vote, go to the polls, vote early, bank your vote if you can, because election day, anything can happen. Get your votes in early and then bank that vote and then go from there. If you have to vote in person, by all means, but drag one person with you or 2, especially if there are people who are sitting on the couch complaining about something, and get them out to vote, because the low propensity voters are the ones who are breaking for Trump, close to 80%. All right, I'm done here. I'm going to go ahead and look to any questions here. If there's any questions, 64 people on call. Awesome. So let me get out of this. All right, let me change my screen. There we go. All right, great. So I hope that was good. I'm sorry for all I need to get a producer. If anyone wants to volunteer to be a producer, I'll give you the password. You can help me with this. We can pre-screen people if we need to. Most people are good on the chat, so it's not a problem there. But pushing slides over and stuff like that, it's a little bit much, and it's a lot of pressure on me to do this. I've been using StreamYard for a long time, but some things happen, like the internet going down, that I can't do anything about. That it happens. Even Tim Pool has to happen to him, so I feel okay. If it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody. All right, yes. So let me pull this up here. we stopped here. Let's keep going. So, yeah, thank you. I represent Kamala, John Doe. Yeah, I represent Kamala in the way that you don't think I do. So, interesting. So I'm gonna leave this on the screen here. So, yeah, I guess I'm not. I'm sure it's probably maybe not. Okay. All right. We'll just. I'm gonna go slow here, and I'm gonna end the stream fast because my internet's acting up again. All right. So thank you for that comment, Joe. Poly market as Texas is safe. Poly market, like these other markets, they are reactionary. I don't put a lot of stock in those, but it does show indication of where the trends are going and where the excitement is and where the enthusiasm is. So, yeah, Texas. I mean, yeah, it's going really well for us. Yeah. So you remember that her name is Catherine, or I can't remember her name, but yeah, yeah. I mean, it's incredible. So that just multiply that across the entire country. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn, for coming out. Have fun at your soccer game. Grandkids are awesome, and that's why we're fighting. We're fighting for your grandson, for sure. Let's see here. Jeffrey says here, the beautiful but shake, bake, and fruitcake state of California has way too many electoral votes. Yeah, and they're losing their votes too. Unfortunately, we only do censuses every 10 years. If it was every year, they would lose them. They would lose them every cycle. So they're losing their people big time. Yep, sorry about the choppy. So if I'm still choppy, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just gonna stop it right here, guys, while the goods are getting good. But nevertheless, guys, let me just want to thank you so much for coming on board with us. We've been doing this for about 2 hours and 42 minutes, and I'll do this again. I have another video coming out. This is going to be for my African American and my Black voters or my Black supporters. This is going to be a video that you can give to anybody who you know who's Black, who is considering voting for Democrat because that woman told me at the poll. Watch this video because I'm going to give, I think, 3 reasons why you shouldn't. And there are actually 2 reasons why. And they're very compelling. In fact, it came from me talking to this woman that made me inspired to do this video. 2 questions that you can ask any Black person to effectively prevent them from voting Democrat if they are intellectually honest. And so look out for that. So guys, right now it's 11:16. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm gonna go through here and, as I normally do, and thank people who came on the stream. And with that, I will get out of here. Stephen Richard, thank you so much for coming on. Carol Reeves, Debbie 101, Dina Pineda. I hope I said that right. Pineda. And Dom Val 65. And Sacred Grove, Nicholas Little, Dewey, Gwendolyn, of course, Hale, John Doe for that comment that I'm like Kamala Harris. That's a new one on me. And Jeffrey and Ulysses, thank you. Tell me about my audio issues, which is why I'm getting off right now. So that being said, guys, I love you and super excited to get on X now and look at some more stuff because I'm all over X. Follow us on X because we're constantly tweeting. Anything that's important is going to be out there. It's going to be retweeted or it's going to be me giving an opinion. But that's how I kind of keep track of things so I can search on myself and find out to go back. Check us out on Locals. We're going to put those top 10 constitutional amendments, what they are, why they are, up on our Locals behind the paywall. So you have to be a supporter there. I think it's going to require like $1, I believe, or the minimum you can do. And then you can have access to that. And all the articles are there now are for free as well. The Mark Robinson deal and about Kamala and her father being a communist. Bunch of stuff out there. It's all for free. And have at it. And until next time, guys, I will see everyone in the next video.